I'm here today with Julia Wise, one of the co-leaders of the Boston Effective Altruism Group. We've just been, Julia was one of our guests today with the Life Worth Living seminar in Yale College. So we're here in New Haven today to talk about life's purpose, how to live a good life, a life worth living. Julia, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
You and Jeff have chosen to live a pretty remarkable life. May not seem remarkable to you, but to folks on the outside, you made some kind of striking decisions to give away about half of your income. And that has places some constraints on how you live your life and some of the decisions that you make. How did you become convinced of this way of living?
I think in some ways I was always convinced of it. I think from childhood I sort of noticed that, and my parents tried to emphasize to me that I was lucky, that we were all lucky to have more than we needed. And I knew that there were people in the world who didn't have what they needed. And in my, sort of stumbling way as a child, I started trying to figure out how I could remedy that and how to make things more fair. So as I've gotten older, I just see it kind of as a continuing process of figuring out how can I best use my resources as a person who was lucky in lots of ways to be born in the United States, to be healthy, to be white, to be educated, to be from an upper middle class family. How can I use those privileges to make things more fair for other people?
And so what have you decided to do? Kind of what did that lead you to do?
So the main thing is that Jeff and I give half of our income to the best charities that we can find. We've been ramping that up basically since we graduated from college. We started at around 30% and have been kind of gradually increasing that over the years. We took some time off from giving when I was in grad school, but other than that, we've been trying to increase it every year. So we've been trying to look for the best opportunities to help, because we think money is one of the best tools out there, particularly because we live in a country where we can earn a lot more than people earn in most places. So money goes a lot farther for them than it would go for us.
So that's a particular opportunity that you have as an American.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But then that's interesting. So you do have this global perspective. Largely you really are thinking about globally, where can my money be used most effectively? And from within a utilitarian framework, that's one of the really morally compelling parts of the vision, is to say, actually, we should think quite equally about all human people as being deserving of our concern. But then it raises what ethicists call this problem of kind of special relations. You even struggled, I think in the reading the profile that we read of you, you struggled even with the decision about whether or not to have children. How have you kind of resolved for yourself this kind of really deep, I think, admirable kind of sense of global responsibility to also the kind of intimate personal responsibilities?
Yeah, I think everybody feels pull to help those who are close to them more than to help strangers, and I certainly feel that too. And considering whether to have children was a big decision there, because it's choosing to create a person that will have more pull on you than anyone else in the world. And there were times when I was planning not to have children because I thought it would be wrong of me to have a person who would take up so much of my time and money, just resources of all kinds, because I would be less able to help other people who already existed and already had need. And the way that Jeff and I ended up resolving that was, I was really unhappy about it. I really had always wanted to have children. I planned to be a parent, and the idea of not doing that was really upsetting to me. So after Jeff kind of witnessed what it was like for me to live with that plan of not having children, at some point he said, "This isn't going to work. You're miserable. I'm going to set aside some of my money to be for whatever would make you happy, and you can spend it on vacations or whatever, or you can spend it on having a child, but you're not going to give this money away. And so you need to decide what's going to make you happy to do with this money. And I knew that the thing that I wanted to do most was have a child. So we just had our second daughter. So obviously once we had started, we decided to keep going at least one more. And so some of it is, I think, with money, you can kind of draw a firm line about, like, this is how many dollars I'm going to give away. I think you can, and that's still arbitrary, like 50% is arbitrary, but with other aspects of life, it's a lot fuzzier. You know, I don't know how many hours my children will take, or how many dollars, or how much energy, or how much sleep, or any of that. And, like, no one knows what it's, you know, exactly what it's going to be like when you start that project. And so it's tough to know exactly, like, how much happiness will this bring us, and how much is that trading off against other people's benefit who need help. But we basically, once we had decided that 50% was what we were going to more or less plan to stay with as far as how much we were donating, we thought, okay, well, can we raise children on the other 50%, you know, after taxes and savings and stuff like that? And we decided, yes, we can. I have a friend who says it's obviously possible to live on this amount of money because almost everyone in the world does it. You know, if you look at even like a median American income, it's far more than most of the world's people earn, even after you adjust for what that money can buy in different economies. And so if most of the world's people are raising children, we can obviously do it on half of an upper middle class salary.
So has your relationship to your giving changed since having children?
Since having children, no. I think actually a lot of the interventions that seem to be most cost effective are in the field of health, and particularly child health. There are a lot of things that are dangerous for children in the first few years, and if you help them pass those first few years, they're able to be much healthier adults and just, you know, survive to be adults. So a lot of what we fund is particularly aimed at the health of young children and pregnant women. So for example, malaria is one of the biggest killers of pregnant women and young children in the world. So for me this year, like being pregnant and like having a young child, it was especially meaningful to me to know that I was saving the health or the lives of other women like me and other children like my child. That was really satisfying to me, and I don't regret that at all. Like whatever we would have spent the money on for our family, just like a TV or something, like it was not going to like benefit us in the way that it could benefit those other families. One thing that I did think about in years past was if someone in my family had a particular need, would I want to change where I donate based on that special interest? Because I've often heard people say that they donate, say, to research for a particular disease because they have suffered from that, or they have a loved one who has suffered from it. And I used to wonder, if someone that I loved, had a particular need, would I want to change my charitable giving based on that? And a few years ago, Jeff's mother developed cancer. There certainly is lots of funding out there for cancer, and a lot of people choose to donate because they have a loved one who has a particular type of cancer. And I found that even though I deeply loved and cared about her, I wasn't going to change where I donate based on that. I mean, for one thing, it was too late for her. Like, no amount of research that I could fund was going to help her. But also, other people have mothers also who have problems that can be treated more easily. Like, cancer is really hard to treat. And if I could help several other people's loved ones, that was what I was going to go for when it came to where to give.
Something really, I find it really inspiring personally, and really challenging. And there's also something supremely practical about the ways that you think about this and you talk about this in terms of just being effective and bringing about. It's quite consequential. It's just what's the result of my action, and how do I maximize the positive impact and minimize the negative. as we've been talking around the seminar table, though, a lot of students have worried about, they've raised an objection like, well, in a complex globalized world, how do I really know the impact of my choices and my decisions? And how do you avoid a kind of paralysis of not knowing, oh, I don't know what I should do because I can't know fully the impact and the consequences of my actions. Have you struggled with that sort of paralysis in the past, or why not? Or how do you get over it, if you have?
Yeah, to some extent. I think part of the reason that we've chosen global health interventions is that they seem not totally clear-cut, certainly, but clearer cut than many of the things one could donate to. So one example I've seen given is that 100 years ago, a lot of sort of intellectuals were really into Bolshevism in the United States. Like, that was like the popular cause, and everybody thought it was like the big thing, and this was going to really like change the way the world functioned, and was like, it was horribly wrong. And so sometimes I wonder, with these sort of bigger, you know, maybe policy changes or like these big sort of untried experiments, like, I do worry that we could be terribly wrong about what the effects will be. Whereas with, say, deworming children who have parasites, yeah, there could be negative effects of that, but it seems much less likely to me. And
there are enough of those sorts of opportunities in the world.
Yeah, there are. And I'm not totally certain, but I'm certain enough to go forward.
I noticed in a profile, it was maybe a few years back now, but at some point you were, and you mentioned this in your list, you guys were also saving a substantial percentage of your income. How do you think about that? And it don't have to be kind of strictly accountable to this, this particular philosophy for every part of your life. But how do you think about that use of money?
Some of it is that because we're a couple and we have like somewhat different ideas about how to do money, I kind of win in some areas and Jeff wins in some areas, and saving is like an area that's very important to him. And so that's an area where, like, he said, like, look, of my earnings, like, I want to be saving, this amount. So for a while we were spending very little, and we were the rest was basically going to either donations, taxes, or savings. And at this point, we recently had 2 children, we bought a house last year, and so we were saving with the expectation that we were going to do these like quite expensive things, and that would then essentially be an investment, but like that our children are an investment in our sort of life as a family and our happiness going forward, and that the house is an investment in like where we live as well as financially. So I think we made those decisions for like largely the same reasons that anyone would decide sort of how much to save or not save. And I think that's some of the benefit of having a system where you set aside, this much is what I'm donating, this much is what I'm spending on me, because that budget that is for you, you can spend just like anyone else would. So you save some, you spend some on lunch with your friends, you spend some on groceries and housing and all that stuff. You're just making the decision with a smaller pool of money than you would if you weren't giving any.
So in a lot of this, and we heard a little about this in our conversation with the students, there's kind of the earn to give, right? Get to give kind of model here, and some of it, well, that means there's 2 sides of the equation, and we've talked a lot about the giving side, but in terms of like maximizing earning potential, especially for a lot of college students who are thinking a lot about kind of selecting a profession and trying to figure out kind of what next step. It's interesting. You're actually a social worker by training, which
That's
I assume
true.
was not selected in order to. I don't. At least my wife's a social worker, and she didn't end up there by trying to maximize her income.
Not making the big bucks, no.
Yeah. So how did you personally think about that decision of kind of electing a profession, and would you think about it differently now? And
I do wish, certainly as a student, that I had thought more about what things to study would let me be more useful in the world, either just through better understanding the world or through being able to earn more. So I wish that I had studied more econ, more statistics, more, basically those. So there were two different times where I sort of went through a crisis about what to do career-wise. One was shortly after college. I ended up working sort of as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit, just sort of a like, I finished college, like find something quick kind of a job. And so I was thinking about these different things that I could do. I ended up with going to social work school because I thought it was something that I would be good at. And I was right, like it's something that I'm good at, I enjoy the work. But then midway through social work school, I sort of had this second crisis about like, what if this is really wrong? Like maybe I should be really focusing on the earnings, like I'm letting people die so that I can have a career I enjoy. Like there's something really wrong about that. And I really struggled trying to figure out what else I could do that would earn more, but that I could still sort of see myself chugging along in for the next several decades. And I like couldn't make myself do it. I thought about applying to medical school to be a psychiatrist, which would have a lot of similar aspects to the work that I do as a social worker in mental health. But I just like couldn't stomach the thought of doing med school. I thought I would hate it. And you know, maybe like a stronger person would have just like powered through it or something. Like I don't think anyone like really finds med school like a fun and easy time in their lives. But I also think there's a real danger of like forcing yourself to do something that is just like so wrong for you as a person that you're either that I would give up on it and like just sort of like waste a bunch of effort by like, you know, changing back to something that I found more appealing, or that I would just be unhappy and be a bad example to other people. Like I don't want people to look at me and go like, God, she's miserable. I don't, you know, I don't want to set that kind of example because no one will want to do what I'm doing. So some of it was also thinking, what would be sustainable for me? What will let the model that I'm using be sustainable for other people who want to do this too?
Is that some of the thinking that sounds like it's related to some of your work organizing a community actually of effective altruists? What have you learned in that, in building that community?
I think young people are really hard on themselves or there's a certain type of person who's like really very, very concerned about, you know, am I doing the wrong thing, about all types of decisions. I think in Catholicism they call it scrupulousness, that you're too worried about like the little details of everything that you might get wrong, because there are endless things you might get wrong. And so I think there's a tendency to this, especially in like idealistic young people, and I don't think it's helpful. I think it's way better to find a life that works for you, even though it's imperfect. You know, for example, we used to decide purchase by purchase whether to buy something or like how to do our budget. And at one point I just like broke down crying because I had bought a caramel apple and I was like, I can't believe it. You know, I spent this like $3.50 or whatever on this caramel apple that I didn't need. Like it could have, you know, vaccinated a child, and like now I'm responsible for this. And again, like Jeff was kind of the voice of sanity, being like, you cannot do this for decades. Like you cannot hold up under this strain. And he was right, I think. Like, I can't imagine how you would do that. I mean, I think, you know, people maybe in a monastic community, that's like, they have a structure that supports that, but I didn't have a structure. And certainly, like, in the early years, we didn't know anyone who was doing this, and that's part of why I'm so excited about building the community, is that I've really benefited by seeing other people who were doing this and sort of saying like, okay, this is what worked for them, this is what didn't work, I'm gonna try this thing, and then I know that this other thing didn't work for us already, and being able to share that knowledge with other people when they're trying to figure out what to do. So I'm really excited about having people who can use each other as resources to figure out, how am I gonna do this? I'm not gonna be perfect at it, but how do I at least try something that's beyond what everyone else is just sort of plugged into?
So maybe we can end here then with this question that we ask in the seminar. For you, trying to live this sort of way, what do you do when you fail, when you feel like you have fallen short of the ideals you're trying to live by?
Some of it is just knowing that we have changed what we've done in the past, that we don't have a perfect method, and we're open to changing what we're doing. So like, I've become more persuaded over the years that animal welfare matters, and that by eating animal products, like, I'm probably doing the wrong thing, I'm probably causing a lot of suffering. I have not changed that. I'm still eating everything. And the way that I'm kind of keeping sane around that is the knowledge that, like, I can decide to change. I haven't yet, but maybe I will in the future. And staying open to that is at least better than sort of making up a fake ethical system in which I'm like, oh, animals actually don't matter, like, just to justify what I'm already doing.
Easiest way to avoid hypocrisy is just to change
Lower
your ideals.
your standards, yeah. So when I recognize that I'm not living up to my standards, I at least have the knowledge that I'm not doing it right now, but maybe I will later.
Julia, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your experience with us.
Glad to be here. Thank you.